The guild leader was told to cook something special. Even Rahon Bandana demanded a feast worthy of the last day they'd savor the leader's skills. Not catching their meaning, Cucksok asked Gunova, who coldly announced that, from today, he was fired. Shocked, Cucksok asked what he had done wrong, but Gunova pointed out the real problem: the leader couldn't fight to save his life. No matter how many chores he did, without real fighters in battle, the team always fell apart. Adventure parties could have only 4 members. To grow stronger, they needed to replace Cucksok with a mage, or at least a true warrior. Cucksok begged to stay, but Gunova kicked him in the gut, fed up with his whining. They didn't want him. Once the decision was made, there was no arguing. The next day, Cucksok left alone, his heart a fog of uncertainty about where to go. With an empty wallet and only a few last coins, he wandered into Samaela City, desperate to find work. By chance, he spotted a temporary job office and decided to test his luck. Unsure where to go, upon entering, he was greeted by a female receptionist. She asked if he was there to hire or find work. Cucksok answered he was looking for a job. She said he'd need to pass an interview and a skill test first. She asked basic info: name and hometown. Cucksok said he was 15 from Haso village in the Sin mountain range. Though Cucksok never heard of that village, she pressed on, asking about his work experience. He said he'd been a part of the Fire Dragon group, but only did chores and had just been fired. The receptionist was surprised to hear he'd belonged to an S-rank adventurer group. Even if he hadn't contributed much, having that name on his record could help him find work. Hearing this, Cucksok felt a flicker of hope. Now, he just had to ace the skill test to reveal his strengths and weaknesses. In this world, talents were gifts from the gods, and maybe, just maybe, today he'd uncover a hidden potential. Abilities ranked from G to SSS, with immense gaps between levels. Someone with a G-level sword skill might barely lift their blade, while an A-level could cleave through stone effortlessly. Eagerly awaiting results, Cucksok's heart sank. All his combat skills were rated at the lowest G. That meant he was hopeless in battle. His dreams crumbled instantly. But the receptionist encouraged him there was still a chance if he had expertise in crafts like metallurgy or alchemy. Unfortunately, the specialist for those tests was on break, so Cucksok would have to return next week for further evaluation. I'm desperate. Cucksok lamented he couldn't wait that long. He had just enough coins left for one more loaf of bread before living under the bridge. Understanding his situation, Katsale asked him to try lifting the sack in the corner of the room. As soon as his hand touched the sack, he felt something strange, like a part of his mana was being drained away. Still, he managed to lift the sack. So, Katsale believed he was strong enough to become Master Locke's apprentice. She suggested that the Marquis in Takon region was hiring workers to repair the city walls. Sure. If he agreed, she would write a recommendation letter so he could start immediately. He was deeply grateful to Katsale and set off without delay to meet the contractor. When the contractor read the letter and heard he wanted to work there, he honestly doubted this ragtag kid could carry cement. Yet, needing every hand he could get, he decided to give him a chance. He told him to mix the cement and plaster the walls, promising to pay based on how much work was done. He said he'd come back to check his progress and warned him to work hard, because if, by the time he returned, less than half a bucket of cement was mixed, the wages would vanish like smoke. He wondered why the contractor didn't instruct him to pour mana into the cement to strengthen it, but decided to stay quiet, thinking it must be common knowledge. However, he was surprised to find that just half a bucket of cement was way too easy to handle. So he resolved to use as much cement as he could before the contractor's return. When the contractor came back, he was shocked to see the kid had already completed a large section of the wall. The kid explained it wasn't much, only as far as he could go before running out of cement. The contractor could hardly believe he repaired over 1/3 of the massive western wall. He asked how he managed to fix even the upper parts. The boy explained that he simply threw cement up there and smoothed it flat with a stick. Normally, the contractor would call him a lying butterfly wing too unbelievable, but since he actually did it, he had no choice but to believe. The contractor asked how long he planned to work there, and the boy answered just 1 week. Pleased by this, the contractor told him he'd done enough for today and could go home. Since he didn't have enough cash on hand, he handed him a small pouch and promised to send the rest through the centre. The boy was astonished this small pouch contained more money than he'd ever earned working with the hero group. In the following days, he kept working diligently until suddenly the contractor announced he was fired. He asked, "Why the heck?" The contractor explained that the repair job was meant to provide work for the poor. But since he was so productive, if he stayed, others wouldn't have any jobs left. The contractor wasn't angry, but from what he'd seen, the boy's ability was at least SS rank, maybe even SSS. Therefore, he'd have better opportunities working in the capital or somewhere similar. He gave the boy severance pay for the sudden dismissal and walked away. However, the boy misunderstood badly, thinking the contractor just wanted to kick him out because he was a useless worker. He returned to the centre and told Cat Sale about being fired, still days away from his skill evaluation. At that moment, they overheard a quarrel at the reception desk, someone trying to recruit workers, but the receptionist refused, insisting no one would accept. The girl insisted, urging the receptionist to find someone. An argument erupted between them. Cat Sale came over to see what was happening, and her colleague explained the girl wanted to hire underage workers to mine an unexplored mountains, but she refused to pay up front, only promising wages if the job succeeded. Cat Sale agreed that no sane person would accept such terms, and tried to persuade the girl to hire investors for the mine development. The girl said she couldn't if she didn't pay taxes before the weekend. The mine would be confiscated immediately. At that moment, the boy stepped forward, saying he was eager to take the job. He had some mining experience from his village. The contract showed there was little chance he'd get paid before completion. But before he could respond, the girl interrupted, saying she actually wanted to hire a dwarf, not a scrawny kid like him, because she'd feel guilty exploiting someone like him. But every dwarf demanded at least 10 silver coins up front, which she couldn't afford. So she decided to hire both. As they left together, Cat Sale felt a bit sorry, because in this heat, selling fans might have been a better plan. While daydreaming, her colleague called Cat Sale back to Earth, announcing that the bank had just transferred money. It turned out to be the contractor's promised compensation for all the boys' work. Cat Sale expected maybe 50 silver coins, but to her shock, inside was a check for 200 gold and a career guidance letter for 2k7. She was so stunned she almost vanished. Who knew he could earn that much? She accidentally stumbled over a sack on the floor. Her colleague warned her to be careful, those weren't ordinary sacks. They were actually used to measure a person's mana, growing heavier when touched by someone with a strong mana source. Normally, they didn't react to ordinary people. Cat Sale could easily lift them, but she remembered the boy struggled when he tried. She began to wonder if he was really just an ordinary kid. Meanwhile, Cut and Ulysses were heading into the forest toward her camp. When they arrived, Cut felt a bit uneasy. There was only a single tent. Ulysses said the tent was big enough for both to sleep in, but he replied he couldn't sleep next to such a cute girl. Hearing Cut call her cute, she just felt annoyed, thinking he was just flirting. But the core truth was clear. He genuinely found her incredibly adorable. Ulysses sensed his sincere feelings. So she let go and handed him a simple boiled potato for dinner. Just a humble potato. Yet it was a feast to Cot, who hadn't had anyone cook for him in a long time. He cherished that meal deeply. He also thanked Ulysses for sharing the meal, since Gunova and the other heroes never let him dine in their quarters. That night, they went to bed. But Cot lay restless. Ulysses had climbed into bed wearing nothing but her clothes, knowing sleep wouldn't come with her like that. He decided to step outside the tent to rest. As he left, Ulysses opened her eyes. She'd only been pretending to sleep. She'd deliberately gotten into bed in lingerie to test if Cot was the type to take advantage while she slept. But now she knew he was truly a good man. The next morning, Ulysses awoke and left the tent. She found Cot asleep beneath a tree, and he felt a twinge of guilt for letting him sleep outside. But then she noticed her jacket had been mended. When Cot woke, she asked if he was the one who fixed it, and he owned up to it. She was deeply impressed by his sewing skills and began wondering if he was truly as talented at mining as he claimed. But it was too late to find anyone else now, so they decided to get to work. She asked if Ulysses had chosen a mining spot yet, but she said she'd pick randomly and hoped the spirits would bless her with a secret find. He led her to a part of the mountain. After some observation, He uncovered a rock studded with precious gems. He found them with such ease in just minutes. He gathered all the gems in that area. She couldn't believe her eyes. If she sold these gems, she'd have enough to pay off her debt. But the bandits forbade her from selling them. Ulysses realized he was right since Kot found them. He would keep the money from selling the gems. But that wasn't what he wanted to say. He meant the gems would be worth more if they turned them into magic crystals. Yeah, was. Ulysses doubted at first, but Kot didn't wait for her to question further, and immediately, she was too stunned to find words, because not only did Kot create magic crystals on the spot, but he did it instantly, while even the most experienced mages took at least an hour. After transforming all the gems into crystals, he agreed to let her sell them. She headed toward the city, while Kot stayed on the mountain to handle some matters. Ulysses arrived at the city customs office and declared her intent to sell magic crystals in the royal capital. But because they were so precious, the customs officer questioned where she got them. No way, he believed some random kid had made them. So she showed her royal seal to shut down his nosiness. This was actually just a clever lie. Ulysses had long since stopped working for the royal family, but since they forgot to revoke her insignia, it still held power. A customs officer granted her permission to use a teleportation magic circle to reach the royal capital. Upon arriving, Ulysses visited her old friend's shop and told Mimiko she had a few magical crystals to sell. At first glance, Mimiko thought the crystals weren't worth much, but after a closer look, she discovered they contained 10 times the usual amount of mana. That meant each crystal was valued at 10 gold coins. Ulysses was speechless. Kot had given her 50 crystals like these, and Mimiko handed her a pouch containing 500 gold coins. Before Ulysses left, Mimiko made 2 demands first: that Ulysses promised to only sell crystals like these through her shop, because letting such powerful crystals circulate without control would only spell disaster. Secondly, she wanted to know the name of the person who created these crystals. Ulysses agreed to Mimiko's first request, but she said she couldn't reveal the creator's name without first getting his permission. Mimiko, wielding her royal mage authority, tried to command Ulysses to disclose the creator's identity, but Ulysses was no longer bound to the royal family, so she was under no obligation to comply. Realizing she couldn't force Ulysses' hand, Mimiko at least asked her to ensure Kot wouldn't run off to another country. She also wanted Ulysses to tell Kot that if he agreed to work for the royal family, she was ready to grant him a noble title, full freedom to use the royal laboratory, and all the accompanying privileges. Ulysses left Mimiko's shop and returned the next morning to meet Kot. She was stunned to find he'd built a complete house during her absence. Setting that aside, Ulysses explained that a friend of hers wanted to offer Kot a position as royal mage. Accepting this role would treat him like nobility, with a steady salary and plenty of benefits. Kot found it hard to believe such a sweet job just fell from the sky. It felt too good to be true. But Ulysses reassured him it was a light duty with high pay. He could jump in without worry. She asked what he planned to do, but Kot said he would decline. Ulysses was shocked at how quickly he refused. Everyone else would fight tooth and nail for the chance to be a royal mage. But after hearing his reason, she felt a mix of frustration and pity. He simply thought he wasn't worthy of a higher position. Plus, he was still clinging to a faint hope of returning to serve as a lowly errand boy for the Fire Dragon Guild. Speaking of the Fire Dragon Guild, they were currently getting beaten to a pulp by a monstrous tree. Gonova, for some unknown reason, couldn't use fire magic and had to rely on Mark Lewis for healing. She tried her best to help, but her healing spells weren't working as they normally would. Gonova asked the newbie to use fire magic against the tree, but he didn't know fire magic, and it was supposed to be Gonova's job. The group wasn't as coordinated as before without Kot. Only Bandon realized the team was slowly falling apart. Back to Kot, his current job was helping Ulysses mine precious gems. He said he found a promising vein yesterday and could gather more for her. Ulysses was grateful for his enthusiasm, but worried he might be exhausted after working all day. Kot reassured her he was fine. He'd slept 6 hours the previous night. Ulysses was surprised and started wondering how he managed to build a house and still get 6 hours of sleep. But Kot misread her silence as frustration over his long sleep and quickly apologized, promising to work harder to make up for his laziness. Ulysses really needed to explain Kot's true strength to him, but she didn't know how to start. So, they went back to mining together, with Kot leading Ulysses to the spot where he'd found the vein. Though it looked like any ordinary forest, Kot said Ulysses could still find some gems here. However, he warned her not to dig deeper than 500 meters. As if it was that easy to dig that far, then Kot turned and walked away, prompting Ulysses to ask where he was going. He explained he was heading to another mine and would return to meet her later. Ulysses spent the whole day digging, and by evening finally uncovered a massive topaz. She had already transferred all the gold from the earlier magical crystals to her crusher's account since he was the one who found them. But this time, since she found the topaz herself, she could use the money from selling it to pay fines. She even considered convincing Kot to turn the stone into a magical crystal for greater profit, but thought better of it. She didn't want to exploit his kindness. Speaking of Kot, she decided to check on how he was doing, having seen his work output before. She knew he would always overdo it. But she had no idea he'd constructed an entire tunnel system in just 8 hours. Finally, Kot came out and told Ulysses, "Sorry, you only found a small amount of the stone you're after. Everything else you dug up is just worthless rock. I plan to throw it all away once we're done." Ulysses looked at the cart loaded with stones and felt strangely sad that such beautiful gems were deemed worthless. She asked, "What are those?" Kot explained, "That's midrin ore. But in my village, midrin is so common people just toss it away whenever they dig it up." Ulysses was at a loss for words after hearing that. Beyond wondering how Kot ended up in such a backwater village, she asked him, "If midrin is considered trash, then what kind of stone are you searching for?" Kot pulled out a small stone and said, "I'm after Ori Chankium." But he had only managed to dig up enough to fill a small box. Ori Chankium is known as the metal of the gods. Just a single gram is worth millions? Yet, Kot quietly unearthed a whole box of it. But Kot told Yulia she only needed to dig 8 kilometers deep to reach the vein. Still, Yulia decided today was enough because the topaz she found was already enough to pay her taxes. So their contract was considered complete. That meant Kot had to start looking for a new job. Because no AI had yet told him about the mountain of gold sitting in his bank account on the way to the broker's office. He was thrilled to see her again, asking what she was doing here. Bandana said she was no longer a member of the Fire Dragon, but it wasn't that simple. After a disastrous series of 7 failed missions, Gonova and the crew went to the 5-star restaurant to drown their sorrows. But compared to Kot's cooking, everything there tasted like vomit. Gonova flew into a rage, smashing the restaurant to pieces before storming out without paying. In a nearby alley, he ran into Bandana, who warned him that destroying a restaurant was crossing the line, even for Piccolo. Yet Gonova cared about only one thing: eating good food. He ordered Bandana to find Kot and force him back, even if it meant breaking Kot's bones. Clearly out of control, Bandana didn't waste energy arguing with him. She snatched Gonova's teleport crystal and dashed out of the alley. Losing that crystal meant Gonova was as good as done for. Besides the restaurant chaos, Marvel Fish was summoned away by the church wig. So the Fire Dragon crew officially disbanded. Though Dana didn't spill all the details about Gonova's meltdown, Kot was devastated to hear the Fire Dragon was no more, meaning he had no chance of rejoining. Bandana couldn't understand why Kot still wanted to go back to that group. Kot explained he owed Gonova a lot, still naively thinking he was a cool guy, probably cool in a reckless way, which made Kot genuinely sad that he couldn't work with him anymore. Bandana never cared about Gonova. He was just a reason for her to quietly watch over Kot. Since Kot was heading to the job broker, Bandana guessed he was looking for new work. If so, she had the perfect job waiting for him. A friend of hers nearby was searching for an assistant in his workshop, a pretty good gig, because that friend was a grandmaster craftsman, one of the rare few in the world, and incredibly important. Their influence rivals that of nobles bearing the title of Viscount. Bandana asks if he wants to take the job, and he eagerly agrees. She hands him a map and sends him off on his way. Finally, he arrives at the workshop of the master craftsman, but he's a bit taken aback. It looks just like an ordinary house. He knocks, and a little elf girl named Meeson answers the door. At first, he's surprised the master craftsman is just a tiny girl, but Meeson explains she's only the assistant, not the master herself. Hearing this, Cot says he's here to take the job, and Meeson beams with joy. She needs all the help she can get. Meeson leads him into the kitchen, and as he steps inside, a horrendous stench assaults his senses like the very pits of the 19th circle of hell. She apologizes for the mess, explaining the master keeps her working non-stop, leaving no time to tidy up. Right then, the master calls for Meeson, and she rushes off. She asks Cot to help clean the kitchen. Despite hoping to assist the master directly, Cot shrugs. Housework is easy. So, he jumps right in. Half an hour later, the kitchen gleams, but Meeson hasn't told him what to do next. So, he wanders the hallway. Searching for her, he finds a door and knocks. A girl's voice invites him in. But when he enters, Cot is stunned. A nearly naked girl lies on the bed. Flustered, he quickly apologizes for intruding, but she shows no sign of discomfort at being discovered like this. Cot explains he's looking for Meeson, and the girl tells him Meeson is in the basement. As Cot turns to leave, his eyes catch a strange black seal on her stomach. He recognizes it as a curse and asks if she'll let him examine it closely. She agrees, so he steps closer and inspects the cursed area. Curses like this usually ravage the organs nearby, so she likely can't eat much anymore. But to his surprise, her stomach is still fine, so he offers to cook something for her. Meanwhile, Ulysses meets with Mimi to discuss the Midrin numbers. The Orichankum Cot found this time hasn't even been refined into magic crystals yet. Yet, their value is already over 50,000 gold coins. Ulysses grows worried and asks Mimi what would happen if people discovered Cot's true skills. In the best case, he'd be kidnapped and turned into a slave. In the worst, assassinated for being too big a threat. Mimi asks what Ulysses plans to do with Cot. So far, she's considering helping him become a master craftsman. That way, he'd gain enough status and power to avoid being exploited. Then, she intends to become his personal bodyguard. However, convincing Cot to accept this plan won't be easy. He's too innocent to realize just how talented he truly is. Worse, he constantly underestimates himself. Ulysses knows she must act before Cot unwittingly walks into danger. Meanwhile, Cot finishes cooking porridge for the girl he met earlier as Michelle, and master craftsman Ophelia emerge from the basement. They're stunned to see the kitchen no longer looks like some chaotic dungeon from the Joseon era. Even more surprising is Cot's spotless cleanup in such a short time. Ophelia notices Cot cooking porridge, and he explains the girl said she was hungry. Worried, Ophelia asks Cot to promise not to tell anyone about this girl. Cot promises, so Ophelia lets him off early and gives him 3 silver coins. Cot is amazed by such a generous reward just for cleaning, but Ophelia says he deserves it for working hard and asks him to return tomorrow. Later, Ophelia brings the porridge to the girl's room and warns her not to be seen by strangers. However, this time Cot doesn't seem dangerous, so Ophelia isn't too worried. He plans to share a daily vlog on TikTok. The girl's name is Liz Lott, but she hasn't eaten yet, so Ophelia wants to check the porridge for poison. Liz Lott says it's not necessary, though she's only just talked with Cot. Her instincts tell her he's a good person. Besides, the curse has spread too far now, so even if she's poisoned, it wouldn't change anything. She's lived surrounded by suspicion from everyone. This time, she wants to trust someone completely. Yin. Suddenly, Liz Lott sits up and says she's fine. She even feels stronger than ever because the curse has been broken. Ophelia is at a loss. Such a high-level curse is notoriously difficult to lift. Yet clearly Cot's granddaughter managed to do it. Meanwhile, the secret organisation that cursed Liz Lott is holding a meeting. They just discovered the curse was broken. Their plan was to kill Liz Lott remotely with the curse. But now, they'll have to take more drastic measures. That night, Ophelia and Liz Lott head to Mimiko's shop. They have urgent matters to discuss. Removing their hoods, Mimiko and Yulia see their faces. They realise these are the 3 princesses of the kingdom, and it's clear the assassination target is one of them. They don't yet know who's behind it, but Liz Lott is the only daughter of the king and the princess of the Garuma Empire. Her existence symbolizes peace between the two nations. Or, clearly, someone is trying to ignite war. Mimi feels relieved Liselott is safe, but is shocked to learn she could break such a powerful curse. But Liselott revealed it wasn't her alone who broke the curse. It was shattered by someone named Kot. The moment those two heard the name Kot, shock rippled through them like a thunderclap. They still couldn't grasp that a curse haunting them for years was undone by nothing more than an ordinary guy. By now, she knew Kot had been powering up the player's account like some kind of VIP. But she barely took her eyes off him for a moment on that very day, after he had literally saved the princess Yes, the real, living Princess Shizuka. They were sure the kingdom would reward his heroism. Yet first, Mimiko insisted the most urgent task was to hunt down whoever had cast the original curse. Usually, Liselott's chambers were protected by powerful anti-curse magic, so someone had to have tampered with those wards before the curse took hold. Only 3 people in the kingdom had access to Liselott's room at that time: Riskus, son of the royal adventurer general, Cheston Menon, the bishop of the church, and finally, Isadora, the kingdom's 3rd queen. But they couldn't accuse anyone without solid proof, so finding clear evidence was their only way forward. Before making a move, Ophelia suggested setting a trap to lure the culprit into the open, and she already had a flawless plan. Liselott had just turned 15, and, by royal tradition, she had to leave home for a year of training. Those behind the assassination plot would surely try to approach her again, so Ophelia planned to fabricate a fake grandmaster at the crafting workshop, spreading news that Liselott was training there. The assassins would likely investigate this fake grandmaster to plan their attack, only to fall straight into Ophelia's carefully laid trap. However, they needed someone skilled enough to play the role, and Ulyssia had already found the perfect candidate. She showed Ophelia one of the magical crystals she had crafted. The moment Ophelia saw it, all doubt vanished. This was the highest grade crystal she'd ever laid eyes on. Cut to the next day, Kot returned to Ophelia's house, ready to work again. But when he arrived, a note on the door told him she wasn't home. By chance, Kot bumped into Meeson and asked what was going on. Meeson explained after Kot left yesterday. Ophelia suddenly went out with Liselotti and they still hadn't come back. Unluckily for Kot, that meant he had nothing to do today, so he decided to head to the guild to grab a bite. While eating, he overheard an adventurer party nearby worried because their porter was sick. Without a porter, they couldn't proceed with their next mission. They didn't have time to recruit a replacement, so the mission looked doomed to be cancelled. Kot thought it over and was sure he could take on the porter's job himself. So, he stepped up to the adventurer team's table and introduced himself, claiming he'd accidentally overheard their conversation. And though he was a terrible fighter, he believed he could be a useful porter for the group. Senna scoffed at the idea of him wanting to be a porter. Seeing only a kid who still smelled like milk, she was certain he couldn't handle the grueling work that lay ahead. Kans tapped his little sister on the head and apologised to Court on her behalf, but he, too, doubted the boy's ability to pull it off. This was no easy job, especially since their mission involved facing golems weighing over 200 kilograms. Yet, Court was brimming with confidence. He claimed he could effortlessly carry 200 kilograms. To prove it, he instantly hoisted both Danzo and Kans into the air. No sweat at all, even with Kans clad in armour weighing over 150 kilograms. The game still felt easy to him. Clearly, he had demonstrated his true strength. So the group decided to hire him as their porter on the way to the mission site. One by one, the team introduced themselves to their new recruit. Kans was the team's warrior, favouring his fists over his sword despite being skilled with both. Danzo was a samurai, and Senna an archer. There was one more member, but he was down with a cold and couldn't join them that day. They needed Court as a temporary substitute and were genuinely glad to have him on board. He thanked them for giving someone useless like him a chance. The team exchanged confused looks, wondering what he meant. Because if he were useless, how on earth could he squat and lift 400 kilograms like it was morning exercise? They figured it was just his quirky sense of humour. They pressed on, but suddenly Court screamed out, "Attacked!" Everyone spun around to rescue him. only to find Court wrestling with a slimy slime. His panic was real, though, so Khans told him to stay calm. All he had to do was destroy the slime's core, and it would log out till... He tried exactly that, but when his dagger stabbed the core, it didn't pierce through instead. He ended up stabbing himself. Obviously, Court couldn't solo kill this slime, so Senna stepped in to finish it off. She was shocked at how terrible Court's fighting skills really were. Though he had said he didn't know how to fight, she hadn't expected it to be this bad. Court apologised, feeling useless. But the whole group, assured him he didn't need to worry. Their job for him was simply to carry the loot from the mission. They'd handle the fighting. Court couldn't believe what he was hearing. He'd just been defeated. Yet his teammates showed no anger, so different from how he was treated back in Fire Dragon. He felt incredibly lucky to have found such kind comrades. Finally, they reached the cave, but it was pitch dark inside. So Senna released some glowing moss to light their way. As the cave lit up, Court noticed droppings on a rock. He asked Khans if that was something to worry about. If so, there might be a goblin nest nearby. No need to worry. They could handle a few goblins as long as they didn't face a whole horde. Because if that happened, no one in the group could survive. They pushed deeper into the cave, eventually reaching the ruins. Senna tried to kill the goblin quickly, but it was already too late. The goblin had called reinforcements, and now the team could hear an entire horde approaching. Goblins were closing in from both front and rear. No report had mentioned this many, and now escape was impossible. Senna asked Danzo if he had a plan, but with the odds so grim, all they could do was prepare for death. Suddenly, Viquop spoke up. He'd found a secret passage in a nearby wall. This was a glimmer of hope, but even with a way out, they couldn't outrun the goblin horde. Someone needed to create a diversion. Danzo and Khans nodded to Senna, who understood their unspoken plan. She pulled Court into the secret passage and closed the door behind them. Court didn't understand why Danzo and Khans were still on the other side of the door, but Khans explained that if all the goblins ran after them, the horde would chase and slaughter them all. So he and Danzo would try to lure the enemies away, buying time for Court and Senna to escape. Yet, Court didn't want to abandon his teammates. But Senna insisted they couldn't turn back. She didn't want to leave her comrades either. But Court wasn't fit to fight, and her own combat skills were only average at best. If both returned, they'd just get in each other's way, only hindering Danzo and Khans. Besides, she believed in them. They'd find a way to survive, but that was just comforting herself. Because Danzo and Khans knew they were likely to die here, yet they harboured no regrets in sacrificing themselves to protect their teammates. Protecting comrades was the highest honour a warrior could claim. Senna told Court they needed to leave immediately, releasing glowing moss to light a path out. But then she was stunned to realise this wasn't just any secret chamber, it was the boss room. And now they were trapped inside with the Iron Dragon. Meanwhile, back in town, Lisa and Lotta wanted to find Court. So they asked Ulyssia to guide them to his inn. After unlocking his room, they stepped inside, but to their surprise, he wasn't there. Suddenly, they heard the AI voice say if they were looking for Court, he had gone on a mission in the northeast cave. Not realising the voice came from an AI, she immediately dashed out of the room, desperate to find who had spoken. But when she burst outside, there was nothing left to see, only confusion swirling in her mind as she tried to grasp what had just happened. Yet, the information seemed true. He was indeed in the northeast cave, possibly teetering on the edge of danger. According to Ulyssia, that area once hosted a goblin extermination training program, meaning the surviving goblins might have made that cave their den. Ulyssia urged Lotta to stay behind, promising she would go to help, but Lisa Lotte stood firm, insisting on accompanying Ulyssia. Ulyssia thought it reckless dragging a princess into a monster's lair was a gamble with fate. Yet, Lisa Lotte argued she had trained in magic. Being a mage from childhood, she was confident she could defend herself. Plus, with Ulyssia responsible for her protection, leaving Liz-Lotte alone felt like the greater risk. In the end, Ulyssia relented, allowing Liz-Lotte to join her. The two, with Otter by their side, marched straight toward the cave. Fresh, glowing moss on the walls told them someone had passed recently. At that moment, Lislot cast a sensory enhancement spell on herself and Ulyssia. Instead of listening for sounds to track him, Lislot dropped to her knees and began sniffing like a hound on the hunt. She'd only been near him for less than 10 minutes, but that was enough for her to memorize his scent. After a moment, she caught his trail. She also heard the clash of battle echoing from a nearby corridor, alerting Ulyssia and overlaying her stats for swift rescue. There, Danzo and Khans held their ground, locked in fierce combat with goblins. They had fought bravely for some time, but at this pace, their endurance was wearing thin. Just as they neared critical injury, Ulyssia burst in, wiping out the goblins with a single sweeping strike. Meanwhile, deep inside Chamber 7, Senna sank to her knees in despair. She could never hope to face a dragon. She apologized for dragging him into this mess, convinced they were both doomed to die there. But he calmly reassured her, saying there was nothing to fear. He'd dealt with countless creatures like this before. He stepped forward toward the dragon, and the moment he reached it, he leapt into the air and landed on its tail. What seemed like a mere touch quickly severed the dragon's tail clean off. Then he repeated the motion, slicing through each of the dragon's limbs. Senna couldn't believe her eyes. The same person who struggled against a slime was now effortlessly dismantling a dragon. But she even felt a flicker of fear, while he remained puzzled by her surprise. For him, handling golems was just another day's work. At that moment, Ulyssia rushed into Chamber 7 to check if the core was still safe. And there he stood, oblivious, amidst a mountain of dragon corpses, sliced limb by limbs. She was overjoyed to see you arrive and grateful you came to save her friend. Because Danzo and Khans might still be trapped in danger's grip, but Yui assured them she had already rescued them. Suddenly, she decided she had to visit her crush's village. At the same time, a mysterious woman appeared, looking frozen in time, cut to the group returning to the workshop her crush was building. What greeted them was nothing short of breathtaking. The barren land from 3 days ago had blossomed into a colossal mansion. Agricultural experts should seriously study how Kurt cultivated this miracle. How could it be that, in just 3 days, everything thrived as if sprinkled with magic fertilizer? Every plant and fruit Kurt planted had already borne fruit, and jaws dropped in awe. Who could resist such wonder? But Ulyssia quickly reminded them, this is a workspace, not her private home. They stepped into the mansion, and Kurt apologized for not preparing a proper welcome. He led them on a tour around the house. Each room screamed surprise louder than the last. Not long after, Kurt showed them his water supply system, crafted from stone to ensure an endless flow. Yulia, strong and seasoned, was baffled by how he achieved such a feat. Curious, she asked Kurt, who cheerfully explained. He reassured them that even with constant use, the water and resources would last a whole year. He revealed a bed made entirely from feathers. Next, he brought them to the most important place, the Grandmaster's office. He asked Ulyssia when the Grandmaster would arrive, but she kept it a secret. As the owner here, she only replied that the Grandmaster would come after they inquired about his bedroom. He said he would rest in the kitchen whenever tired. He, refusing to claim a room, the group had to plead with him for 2 whole hours. Finally, Kurt agreed to stay temporarily in the Grandmaster's chamber. Everyone was exhausted from the begging, but then Ulyssia remembered Lislot remained a vulnerable target. She asked Kurt if he could set protective barriers around the house, but he lacked that power. Thankfully, Ulyssia still had a few talismans Mimi had given her, so that night, she went around the house placing charms. She decided to place extra wards near Lislot's room to shield the princess. But while Ulyssia worked, Lislot imagined her white horse prince sneaking outside. She ran out excitedly, only to be crushed by the sight of Ulyssia instead. Ulyssia shared the same disappointment, baffled by Lislot's wild fantasies. The next morning, Lislot dressed seductively and headed to the kitchen, clutching a plate. She pretended to want to help Kurt prepare breakfast, but upon seeing someone enter, her face fell. Looks like more disappointment was coming her way. One by one, the others woke up to the scent of freshly toasted bread filling the air. Turns out, Kurt had built an oven inside the house to bake bread and brew tea daily for them. He laid out breakfast, and as the group tasted each bite, they marvelled at the exquisite flavours. Yet, Kurt himself was nowhere to be found at the table. Ulysses discovered him outside, wiping away nearly all the talismans she had placed the night before. She rushed to stop him, but it was too late. Only one charm remained half-cleaned. What stunned her most was that even Mimi's talisman, once thought unremovable, was wiped away by Kurt as easily as cleaning a table. Now, Ulysses had to invent a story explaining why those charms were on the walls. She made up that some kids had scribbled them there as a prank, and our naive hero believed it without hesitation. And Gahimdi Ashen, but a new problem arose: how to protect Lislotte from being cursed. Days after Mimiko's arrival, would Kurt's presence be enough to shield the poor princess of Lord Lislott? Cut to Bishop Tristan, who loved pizza for breakfast, deciding to kick Mark Lewis out of the church because the adventurer group's antics were a mess. They constantly fought martial arts battles, and worst of all, their leader barked incessantly. Bark, 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 like, bark, like. Nine dice. Christian admitted she accidentally unleashed lightning magic that wrecked the restaurant, but blamed the owner for serving food that tasted like animal feed. Clearly, this girl had no clue she acted like the world belonged to her. Christian had lost all patience listening to her flimsy excuses. Yet because Mark Lewis was a powerful mage and former council member of the church's valuable assets, he gave her a chance to redeem herself. He proposed that if Marklefish completed a task for him, he would grant her priesthood. He poured her a glass, wine from an empire hostile to Poland. Jan. He asked her to drink it, trusting him. She downed it in one gulp. A wicked smile spread across his face, revealing 32 gold teeth that hadn't seen a dentist in ages. After finishing the glass of wine, Mark Lloyd Phipps agreed to take on the task. Then, Christian maliciously ordered her to help the church with an assassination. Princess Lotte was horrified. She never wished to be dragged into such cowardly schemes. But it was too late. The wine she drank had been cursed, probably the same curse that doomed 100 soldiers without mercy. Dundas Ayadasi. The very curse that slowly gnawed away at the life of Lisa Lotte herself. Sir, after saving her with a magical soup, collapsed to his knees in agony. Mark Lewis listened intently as Cheston revealed the harsh truth: she was cursed. Her body would now reject all food, and yet starvation meant certain death. Only he held the power to break this cruel curse. He made it clear if she wanted to live, she must obey him without question. Cheston felt trapped, betrayed by fate itself. Mark Lewis had no choice but to accept the grim demand. Meanwhile, she lay unconscious within the magic circle, powerless before the Demon King. Drawing from his vast anime knowledge, Ed boldly guessed Tristan might be a demon, possibly even the final boss in disguise. Back at the crafting workshop, Ulysses wondered why the enemies stopped chasing Lislott and didn't attempt another curse. She suspected either the enemies hadn't located them yet, or their curses kept being neutralized by Cut's culinary skills. Setting aside her doubts, Ulysses turned her attention to Mimiko and Ophelia, who had gone to the city to prepare countless traps to hunt their foes. In a moment of serving food, he accidentally reassured Lislott no longer needing to fear the curse. The barrier only made the attacker glow faintly. Just after explaining this, a shadowy enemy unleashed the ultimate curse upon Lislott. Strangely, he then shone like a firefly caught in the dark. Ophelia quickly set off to deliver this urgent news to Mimiko. Meanwhile, he suggested Lislott join him for a walk and a little shopping trip. Not because his crush needed clothes or supplies, but because since arriving, Lislott hadn't stepped foot outside the mansion. He wanted her to have a chance to breathe and relax. General Erres was gripped by deep unease. He was alarmed to see a thick aura of evil steadily approaching the city, suspecting a monster attack was imminent. He shared his fears with his lieutenant. Generic tried to reassure him that the city's walls were higher and stronger than ever. Meanwhile, Mimiko, Ophelia, and Ulysses tracked down the name of the dark sorcerer who had tried to curse Lislott. Unfortunately, they couldn't extract any information. He'd been silenced by his own allies to cover their tracks. Ophelia grew even more impressed with Cut's abilities. especially since the dead sorcerer's body still glowed eerily, like a ghostly lantern. 99, 97, she thought. If someone as strong as Cut had joined the mission, they'd have found the enemy in just a day. Yet Ulyssia refused to drag Cut into such danger, so they resolved to handle it themselves. Mimiko steps forward to take on the mission of investigating the surrounding area, while sternly ordering Ulyssia to stop Liz-Lot from leaving the mansion at all costs, because now they are certain the enemy has set foot inside the city. Just then, the alarm bells blare out across the city. At the same time, Generic and Ares receive urgent news of a monster invasion. The mage squad quickly lights up the area beyond the city walls, revealing thousands of undead marching relentlessly toward the city. Mimiko detects multiple spatial magic traces and immediately suspects that the mastermind behind this attack is targeting the very fabric of space itself. The assault is laser-focused only by standing united against the undead can their chances of survival rise. But before they can take their positions, the monsters suddenly charge the city walls and vanish without a trace. Mimi receives reports of strange phenomena from her clones and swiftly relays the information to Ulyssia. Immediately, she recalls that months ago, Cot was the one who personally repaired the walls, one of the many perks that come with being a VIP crush. No matter what, it's a win when no one has to spend any mana, and our side still comes out on top. Even Ares starts to suspect that the boy who fixed the walls back then is the real force behind this miraculous turn of events. Cut to the scene where Mark Lewis is revealed to have summoned the undead. She's drained all her magical power, but the demon binding her remains unsatisfied. It forces her to use the last remnants of her magic to summon even more undead. Mark Lewis can't believe it, her life is ending in such a tragic, pitiful way. She reveals the chilling truth. She signed a pact with a high-level demon just to assassinate the princess. And now that same demon tortures her, forcing her to summon undead endlessly in the city. The demon remains ruthless, now demanding she sacrifice her very life force to summon even more undead. Seeing the battle intensify within the city, Ulyssia knows she must secure her own safety. She rushes back to the workshop to check on Cot and Liz-Lot. There, she tells them about the escalating attack and reveals that the monsters vanish every time they touch the city walls. She suspects it's some kind of mind-blowing phenomenon. The viewers are shocked. The knights are shocked. So who isn't shocked, right? It's Cot. He calmly says this is as normal as weighing milk cartons back in his hometown. Nothing to fuss about. Thinking over Cot's words, Ulyssia suddenly hatches a perfect plan to protect the city. She recalls the magic stones Cot collected earlier and realizes she can use them to distract the monsters away from their main source of power. She tells Cot to stay behind at the workshop with Liz-Lot. When they ask what she's planning, Ulyssia replies she intends to destroy the source of power at the ruins once and for all. Our ever-strong and reliable friend, Ares, immediately offers to accompany her, but Ulyssia refuses and insists he stay to guard. Lisa secretly thinks she's refusing because he's too weak. Someone, please, enlighten this guy. Doesn't he get that? The whole story is really about him. The thief tells Ulyssia to leave so the two don't end up making a joint funeral altar. When he chases after her to argue she shouldn't leave him behind just because he's weak, she gently reminds him that there are still lurking scrolling keys threatening Liz-Lotte. She says she needs him to stay and protect Liz-Lotte. Hearing this, his face lights up with relief, finally feeling he's not useless. Ulyssia immediately rushes off to find the magic stones. She spots them and quickly heads to the knight's office, familiar with General Ares, who instantly recognizes her. After some polite greetings, she introduces Mimi, herself, and Ophelia. Upon learning Ophelia is an AI, Ares immediately guesses the princess is in his city and offers to assign knights to protect Liz-Lot. But if only he knew the one guarding Liz-Lot now is even more skilled than his knights, he might think twice. Ulyssia declines the offer. She announces she needs him to create a monster bait team at the city gate, while she will venture alone into the ruins to destroy the monster's power source. The plan sounds reasonable, but he doesn't trust her. He asks what weapon she'll use to destroy the ruins and which troops will support her. In response, Ulyssia shows him the magic stone she carries. Eurus immediately exclaims, "This magic is unreal," and shouts, I can't let you commit suicide like this. Yet Ulysses remained steadfast. The plan will succeed, and you just need to do your part, not wanting to risk her alone. Ares decides to accompany her, while Vice General Generic stays behind to lure the monsters. At first, Generic refuses to stay, but Ares persuades him, and the plan moves forward. The girls depart while Generic hands Ares a cup of wine for a farewell ritual. By custom, they'd normally drink it all and smash the cup, but this time they choose to pour it out with the belief they will return to share a sweeter drink. Meanwhile, in the workshop, Cot feels utterly powerless as everyone fights with all their might, and he's stuck here doing nothing. Determined, he decides to forge his own sword, recalling an old village elder's words that a stone can reflect one's true self. He remembers how sharp Danzo's blade was and strives to recreate that edge. At the ruins gate, Ulysses holds the magic stone, praying it will work. She asks everyone around to close their eyes, then throws the stone forward. Astonishingly, with just a single throw, every monster vanished as if swallowed by the shadows. Ares, eyes wide with disbelief, wondered aloud if this was some secret weapon crafted by the guild. But no, it was nothing more than Cot's own personal weapon, a silent storm in his hands. Soon after, they mounted their horses and charged deeper into the ruins, ready to face the remaining beasts lurking within. Meanwhile, Cot held the sword he had just forged tightly. He looked at the blade with bitter disappointment. It felt utterly useless. A failure he could hardly believe he created. In his eyes, it barely deserved a D rank, maybe even less than what his brother Chow would assign. As Cot brooded over his flawed creation, Liselott stepped into the scene. The moment she saw the sword, she gasped. It was beautiful in her eyes. Hearing that the sword could channel magic only deepened her fascination. Cot asked if she wanted it, and she accepted with a radiant smile. Her face flushed with happiness as she received the gift. Yet Cot sensed her smile was forced. Something was quietly amiss. He decided to ask directly, and his intuition was right. He bowed his head, heavy with sorrow. Not because he resented protecting her, but because he felt powerless to save someone so precious to him. He recalled Golova's presence in the Western Zone, and guessed that Ulysses' true target was the scrolling key creatures dwelling there. Cot's gaze fell heavily on Liselott, burdened by the cruel truth that he might not be able to protect the one who mattered most. But then, a cold splash of reality hit him. Liselott was not the only special one. Every member of Team Sakura held their own unique light. First defeat accepted. They were both weak, both feeling useless in different ways. So the Link urged them to find a way to become useful. Cot proposed heading toward the western ruins. He reminded them monsters guarded all 8 city gates, but his answer was firm. They would carve their own path if none existed. He even pictured a secret passage, though no obvious path lay ahead now. Meanwhile, deep in the ruins, Yulia's instinct screamed danger, and she chose to retreat. Was disaster looming with bandits lurking among the ruins, or would Cot once again arrive just in time to save the day, as Liselott prepared? Her eyes caught Cot's sword shimmering in the dim light. She remembered Cot saying that raising the sword above her head would trigger magic. Curious what spell such a small blade could cast, she decided to test it herself, drawn with intrigue. She lifted the sword, but to her surprise, nothing happened. Just then, a voice echoed from another room. The bandits announced they were departing now. Turning around, Liselott was shocked to find someone silently creeping up behind her. The scene shifts to the battlefront, where the relentless onslaught of the Andes undead grows fiercer by the minute. Yulia, desperate, asks Ares how much farther they are from the ruins. He reassures her that if they keep pushing and defeating the Andes, they'll arrive soon enough. But Yulia is utterly drained. This battle has sapped nearly all her energy. She's on the verge of collapse, yet feels a flicker of gratitude for the distraction force. Thanks to it, a massive wave of undead has been diverted away from their position. Without Generic's intervention, Yulia and Ares might have already been lifted to the altar of death by the overwhelming numbers of the Andes. Still, Yulia knows Generic's team can't hold out for much longer. They're magical crystals. The only defense against the Andes are nearly depleted. Yulia herself clutches the last few reserves. The only hope for victory lies in swiftly uncovering the source of these undead fiends. Ares takes a brutal hit to the gut, but Yulia can't reach him. She's surrounded by the undead herself. Just then, Danzo and Senna arrive to reinforce them. They introduce themselves as adventurers currently employed by the Khan's magic workshop. Danzo jumps into the fray, supporting Yulia and Ares with fierce combat skills, while Senna uses her tracking abilities to pinpoint the undead's origin. She soon reports the Andes are emerging from the ruins right ahead. Embracing this unexpected glimmer of hope, Yulia uses her last magical crystals to obliterate the remaining undead nearby, then leads the group toward the ruins. She hands Alice a flask of bone broth. The moment Alice drinks it, her wounds begin to heal instantly, but perhaps they acted too hastily. Seconds later, another wave of undead pours from the ruins' gate. Kans and Danzo bravely charge forward, clashing with goblins, while the rest follow, fighting tooth and nail. After defeating the undead, they press inward, swiftly turning any monster in their path to gold dust. Meanwhile, Mark Lewis clings to the last threads of hope. She's certain if the Demon King continues draining her life force like this, she'll be meeting her ancestors sooner than expected. But what can she do? She's too weak to even speak out against that Demon King. The Demon King laughs, reveling in her torment. Yet his smile fades when he notices humans wielding special magical crystals, capable of annihilating undead within a certain radius. He watches Yulia's group advancing and can't help but be impressed. Turns out humans can fight with a resilience he hadn't expected. Muttering that sitting idle for hours is dull, he decides to confront Yulia's team personally. He hopes they'll prove worthy prey for his cruel amusement today. Suspecting this is the undead source, they immediately unleash their magic crystals to wipe the area clean, but the real battle is just beginning. The Demon King appears before them, a sinister grin spreading across his face. At a glance, Yulia recognizes the monstrous figure as the Demon King, hiding her fear behind a proud smile. She tells Ares that defeating this fiend will end the undead curse once and for all. Yulia takes the lead, striking the Demon King square in the face with a magic shard gifted by Crush. But the blow leaves him unscathed. Calm, he reveals his secret: he possesses infinite lives. Yulia snaps at him to shut up, and Ares agrees, swiftly swinging his sword to silence the Demon King. Yet the Demon King doesn't even bother dodging. He lets the blade pierce his abdomen, only for the wound to close instantly. Both are stunned by the terrifying truth he's truly immortal. In reality, the Demon King is silently siphoning Mark Lewis's life force to regenerate and heal. He taunts Yulia and Ares with visions of their comrades fighting outside, declaring they're mere ants to him since he can endlessly spawn undead. Not stopping there, he summons 2 colossal undead giants, boasting they could smash the city gates with a flick. He threatens to crush the adventurous squad guarding the entrance before long. Provoked by his taunts, Yulia and Ares finally reach their limit. Without hesitation, they launch a fierce counterattack. Yulia drives a dagger straight into his heart while Ares perfectly decapitates him, but it's all in vain. The Demon King calmly picks up his severed head, reattaches it with a cruel grin, and declares he will soon drag Lislot from town and tear her apart before their eyes just to watch their faces drown in despair. So desperate. Mark Lewis knows her only chance is to destroy the magical barrier imprisoning her, but she is utterly spent. Weak and powerless, she can only lament her hunger and pray the gods will let her taste the infamous stew one last time. This is her final act before registering her residence in the underworld. At that moment, she hears a voice, Kay's voice. Thinking it's a hallucination, she looks up and the ground cracks open, revealing the escaped monsters and Lislot. They explain they tunneled here to avoid clashing with the undead horde. Kay is surprised to see Mark Lewis, but she stays silent, noticing Princess Lislot with him. Mark Lewis suspects Kay's involvement in some deeper conspiracy. Do you know Mark Lewis? Kay recounts their shared past when they were part of the same adventurer team. He introduces her as Sister Marlowe Fish. She immediately corrects him she was expelled from the church and is no longer a nun. At last, Kay taps into the last shreds of her brain power and realizes Marlowe Fish has targeted Liston's life. But then his mind just blanked, and he concluded it was all just anger from being kicked out of the church. He was painfully naive. Mark Lewis didn't bother explaining he was actually being forced by List. Mark still acted like it was no big deal. Jack's brother, Mark Lewis, spoke gently like a caring older sibling scolding, with no anger in his eyes. Anyway, Mark asked where Ulyssia was, clearly worried since she hadn't shown up yet. He thought she should have arrived before him. Marlowe Fish said Ulyssia was upstairs. He conveniently left out the detail that she was currently at Innova with the Demon King. Lotta volunteered to find Ulyssia and told Cot to break the magic barrier, reassuring her that everything would be fine. Mark kept quiet inside, silently wondering just how foolish he was to let Lislott go alone upstairs, where the Demon King awaited. Meanwhile, Cot pulled out a broom and a bucket of water from nowhere and started scrubbing the magic barrier as if cleaning the tavern floor, leaving Mark Lewis filled with a sea of question marks. Just as Mark casually cleaned the barrier, the Demon King seemed to sense his magic was draining fast. When Yulia launched her next attack, he immediately dodged. The Demon King realized something had shifted. At the same time, he felt his mana weakening dangerously, fearing he might actually bite the dust if he wasn't careful. He wondered what had happened. Could the magic barrier really have been purified? Little did he know. Our silent hero had officially entered the fray. Now he knew the game was truly over. He had to make sure the enemy couldn't use the Mana Stone. But before Ulyssia and Ares could strike again, Liselotte appeared. For the Demon King, the mission was complete. He had torn the city apart to kill the princess, and now that she had willingly stepped before him, there was no need to waste energy. He attacked instantly, and Liselotte collapsed. Ulyssia's world seemed to shatter. She was stunned, unable to believe the young lady they had fiercely protected was dying right before her eyes soon. But then butterflies swirled around Liselotte's body, and Ulyssia suddenly appeared behind the Demon King. She laughed mockingly, declaring that the one he just killed was nothing but an illusion. The magic hidden in the sword Cot mentioned was actually illusion magic. It looked so real. Even the body heat matched perfectly. The Demon King was stunned. He never imagined he could be fooled so easily. He immediately tried to attack her again, only to see butterflies resting on the fallen body. Then she appeared once more, this time right beside the Mana Stone they needed to destroy. She swung her sword, shattered it, and the Demon King instantly vanished. If the caster who unleashed the magic disappears, then all the monsters plaguing the city will vanish too. Everyone bursts into a joyous celebration. It takes Ulyssia a moment to regain her composure. She rushes to Lisa, demanding why the princess left the safe haven prepared for her. Lisa admits her mistake and offers a heartfelt apology. But because everyone has fought and suffered so much for her, she couldn't just sit idly by without doing anything. Ulyssia pleads with her to stop apologizing, insisting that it was Liselotte who saved the entire city, and they are the ones who should be thanking her. Ares even kneels down to express his profound gratitude. Liselotte promises to reward everyone who fought for her survival, but Ares refuses all gifts, only asking for some wine for his team, truly a booze hound at heart. Meanwhile, Mark Lewis clutches his stomach, racked with pain. She realizes the curse upon her hasn't lifted, despite the magic seal being broken. She's convinced she deserves to be logged out of the magic system, and even believes she deserves this fate. Then Kut approaches, offering her a meal. She fears she might vomit, but can't resist the chance to taste Kut's final dish before his death. So she accepts it. Little does she know, Kut wasn't the insignificant kid they all dismissed within the group. No one realized it was he who silently protected them all along. As she eats, she suddenly feels the poison within her dissolve away. Tears begin to fall as she understands every wound they suffered in battle healed rapidly. What they once chalked up to luck was actually Kut's quiet care behind the scenes. Because his strength wasn't in fighting, they all mistook him for weak, but now she knows she made a grave mistake. A mistake with a price too high to bear. 2 figures arrive to apprehend Mark Lewis. Mark cries out desperately for her mercy, but not out of concern. He believes only those who break the AI deserve punishment. When Mark Lewis asks if he's begging for her sake, Kut denies it, saying he's just bringing food inside for her. Kut goes to see Lizelot to make sure she's all right. She reassures herself she's fine, while Ulysses smiles softly. She can hardly believe those two kids were the ones who saved her life that day. She concludes they truly are the master craftsman and the great princess. She approaches them and invites both to return to the workshop. They hold hands, marveling at their incredible fortune. They laugh and tease Kut, asking if he's happy because the two beautiful girls are holding his hand, but that's definitely not what makes him happiest. His joy comes from having real friends who truly care, a home of his own, and no longer feeling useless. This was the dream he'd yearned for his whole life, and now it had finally come true. He gazes toward the magic workshop, realizing this is the first time he has ever felt genuinely happy. That night, he prepares a feast for the knights. Yet, as they eat, no one shows excitement, all eat in silence. He thinks their silence means the food is bad, and they're disappointed in him. Of course, whenever he's sad, it's written all over his face. Ares notices and approaches him, explaining that everyone is silent because the food is so delicious, they're savouring every bite. This praise fills him with pure happiness. Lizelotte then introduces Ares to him. He's the city's knight. Kut compliments how much he loves life here. He lives here, and the city is well managed by Ares. Ares praises Kut's cooking, noting his wounds are healing rapidly since eating, but Kut brushes it off, saying that's just the normal effect of good food. Normal. More like extraordinary. Thanks to him. As they chat, fireworks burst brightly in the sky. He prepared the fireworks to celebrate their victorious night, and everyone joyfully enjoys the spectacle. While their night winds down in happiness, elsewhere, Chiston appears once again. Their schemes remain unclear, but one thing's certain now that Kut is the master craftsman. Sooner or later, fate will come back to bite them. Flashback to Kut's childhood in the mysterious village of Hildegard, silently working as he asks if she is the daughter of the travelling merchant. At first, it was just his constant nagging truly a nuisance, and the elder points out that the town still lacks an official name. And he points out that the town still has no official name. He appoints the master craftsman as the town's vice-governor. Lizelot immediately sees his true intention to place Kut directly under his command. But since Kut doesn't even know he's the master craftsman yet, Lizelot can't let that happen. She responds firmly, such an important decision cannot be hers alone. Margaret starts doubting Lizelot's reaction, especially since she is both princess and official representative of the magic workshop. She should have some authority to decide. Markgrave points this out, and Lizelot is caught off guard, unsure how to reply. Her tension rises as Mark turns to speak with Ares. At this moment, Lizelot can only hope he will refuse to keep Kut's identity secret. However, Ares knows nothing about Kut's situation at all, so he immediately agreed without hesitation. Lizelot, however, had to step in once more to voice her objection. McGraw began to harbour doubts, wondering if the master craftsman was flawed or perhaps lacked true skill. He even thought the man unworthy of such a lofty position. This time, she couldn't hold back. Proudly, she declared that no AI could rival the master craftsman's talent. But in praising him so openly, she inadvertently revealed their secret, like peeling back her own shirt to expose her back. McGraw instantly caught on, so they were trying to hide the truth about the craftsman. With a calculating smile, he declared the master craftsman would surely be appointed as the Vice Lord. Back at Lizelot's workshop, news of this bombshell spread like wildfire. Everyone who heard it could no longer keep their composure. Ulysses, trying to stay calm, voiced her worry they might be forced to reveal the master craftsman's true identity. But how? Because even he himself was unaware. Not knowing, she suggested finding someone else to impersonate the master craftsman, to smooth things over quietly. But that plan was nearly impossible since the town's knights had all met the craftsman and knew he was an AI. Being AI, If they presented a fake, weaker model, the AI would easily see through the lie. Liselott initially agreed with Ulysses' proposal, but when Ulysses considered finding a replacement, the craftsman was like craving pho while eating rice. Liselotte burst out in protest, yelling no one could ever match the craftsman, not in this town, nor anywhere else in the world. Suddenly, she asked where the craftsman was. Ulysses joked he was off babysitting. Liselotte was shocked, yelling that she had just come back from an errand and he had already gone off on his own. She shouted loudly, declaring that even if the child wasn't hers by blood, she would still raise and care for it. Now wearing monk's robes, she didn't know whom to bow to first, but Liselotte knew well she was a princess, free to do whatever her heart desired. After all, Ulysses was just teasing her. The craftsman didn't have any babies anyway. He was busy caring for the egg they'd brought back it was about to hatch, knowing anything the craftsman touched would never be ordinary. Ulysses grew worried about what might emerge from that egg, and just as she feared, her worry became reality when the craftsman called them to announce it had hatched. Cut to Mimi, worn out from drowning in piles of reports on her desk. She complained to Ophelia, but Ophelia just stared, saying it seemed like Mimi's mask was about to slip off. Talking of the documents, Ophelia revealed Bishop Cheston had been murdered and his body discovered. She believed that the Demon King Cheston was silenced by the Pole Church. They needed a scapegoat after summoning the Demon King. Finally, she asked Mimi what she planned to do with Mark Lewis and if she intended to eliminate her. No, deep inside, Mimi wished she could turn to gold, yet she knew that Cott had promised to visit the office in the prison. So if she acted rashly, he would surely fly into a rage, at least with Mark Lewis. A relationship she had once dismissed for months. It had now become the fragile thread keeping her alive in this moment. Speaking of fate, Mimi received a threatening letter, a letter that stole half her soul, claiming the egg Cott had been incubating finally hatched into a baby girl. She wondered if she should ask Ulysses to cast a divination for her. The prophecy was clear, Cott was raising a child. That mocking prophecy, cruel as a jest, had turned into reality. Now she was so stunned, her mind went blank. Immediately, she called an emergency meeting with everyone. The newborn sat on Cott's lap, cupping his cheek, calling him Papa. Though freshly hatched from an egg, the girl looked like a 3-year-old child. Yulia reminded him, no child ever hatches from an egg. This wasn't human. It was a monster. Unfortunately, she demanded to take the baby from him. When asked what she intended to do, she coldly replied she would erase this life's trial version, refusing to let go. He couldn't believe an innocent child could bring danger to them all. Ulysses pulled the baby from his arms, but he vowed to take full responsibility for her. She disagreed, yet the baby looked at her, touched her cheek, and called her Mama. Ulysses melted instantly, dreaming of a future home and children. As if reading her thoughts, someone snapped her back. This baby was not hers or her crush's child. Ulysses denied it, but Liselott snatched the baby from her arms. When the baby touched Liselott's cheek, she too was called Mama. Liselott's heart softened, and unknowingly she let go, letting the baby fall. Senna caught her swiftly, and the baby called Senna sister. Senna was about to enjoy her new title when Lisa rushed over, yearning to be called Mama once more. Lisa argued there was no reason to kill the baby. With the right guidance, even a demon's nature could turn toward the light. Finally, Julia had to agree, and Lisa began naming the child. Because the baby called her Mama, she chose the name Kuri, a blend of her own. Ulysses objected, since the baby called her Mama too. She suggested the name Yukari. The two clashed fiercely, their quarrel waking the baby. The confused child asked why they fought, then held their hands, soothing the tension swiftly. In the end, the group decided it no longer mattered whose name came first. Notice how easily this baby brought up laughter and united everyone. He realized she might be the missing piece to hold them all together. So he proposed naming her Akuri, meaning the land where everyone gathers. The name was unanimously accepted. The baby jumped with joy upon hearing her new name. Though everyone basked in this warm moment, Yulia remained wary of this strange child. Silently, she sent samples of the baby's hair and saliva to Miko for testing, knowing her fate hinged on the results. The next day, Cottet prepared a private room for the baby at home. Akuri was thrilled, but to Ulysses, it looked less like a room, more like a cage. No windows to escape, reinforced with magic just in case the baby truly was a monster. To be sure. Ulysses also arranged for Lislot and Akuri to be kept apart until they received the test results. She had some matters to discuss with Kot and asked him to come along. Akuri wanted to follow, but they told her she couldn't. She entrusted Sina to care for Akuri until they returned. On the way, Ulysses told Kot they should settle things quickly to surprise Akuri by coming back soon. She heard a baby's voice from the carriage, asked if Kot heard it too, and when he said yes, she hurriedly opened the doors. Yulia was stunned to find Akuri sitting inside, neatly dressed and ready to follow along. Perhaps she sneaked out when no one was watching, too adorable to resist. But surely everyone at home would panic if Akuri went missing, so they had to take her back. However, they lacked the time to escort her themselves. Fortunately, Yulia spotted a woman riding behind and asked her to bring Akuri home while they continued their journey. While Ulysses was away, Kot pondered the real reason he worried about the baby. He realized it wasn't dislike, but fear for their safety. He questioned if his decisions were right and what he would do if the child truly became a threat. He wasn't wrong, but no one could predict what the child would become, so no one was entirely right or wrong. As they stood there, an old man came to remind them to continue their journey to save the town. Both Akuri and Kot responded excitedly, while Ulysses could only helplessly watch their enthusiasm. The old man called Kot the brave adventurer Duki, and Akuri cheekily claimed to be his attendant. Then he pleaded with them to save the world from the Demon King's claws. They replied with fierce determination, promising to give their all. At that moment, the old man's daughter-in-law arrived, explaining his memory had been fading lately. He kept muttering nonsense, so she told Kot and Ulysses not to pay attention to his words. Still, she thanked everyone for coming and admitted she was the one who sent out the plea for help. Before diving into the main issue, she commented that the couple, Kot and Ulysses, along with their child, looked like a picture-perfect family. Naturally, the atmosphere thickened with an awkward tension. Before they could even explain, Akuri called Kot Papa and Ulysses Mama. At that moment, all hope was lost. No river in the world could wash away this stain. Ulysses' face flushed bright red like a ripe tomato. She had officially been outplayed. Meanwhile, Kot felt less worried but deeply insulted. He silently vowed to work tirelessly to make amends. He asked the woman what their next step should be, and she explained that their pig farm was in trouble. The pigs looked weak and refused to eat. If things continued this way, all of them would perish. While innocent Akuri tried feeding the pigs grass, Kot observed carefully and quickly deduced the real cause they were suffering from heat stroke. He offered to personally prepare food to help them recover, and the woman agreed. Then she left to take her father-in-law for a walk before getting to work. Kot found Ulysses still standing in the same spot. Her face was still blazing red. She couldn't imagine the home and children she just pictured. Kot felt confident he understood the situation. But oh boy, he was wrong. It wasn't that she blushed from spice. It wasn't about being mistaken for a married couple or wanting to make amends to Ulysses. Quickly, he got to work preparing the food as Akuri happily ran circles around him. He fed the pigs. Meanwhile, Ulysses finally snapped out of her daydream. She slapped herself several times for letting her mind wander so far. She tried to convince herself there was no way she felt anything for that straightforward guy. The reason she had to protect him was simple. She was a professional who took her work seriously. Heart, mind, and soul. But when she glanced at Kot, her heart suddenly pounded fiercely. Boom Ulysses was overwhelmed with confusion, unable to grasp this strange feeling. Just then, she panicked at the sight of a flying dragon. The dragon soared by and landed right in front of Kot and Akuri. But the dragon had no hostile intent. It was merely there to eat the food Kot had prepared. Kot reassured Ulysses that, in rural places like their village, dragons coming to share livestock feed was quite normal. Of course, Ulysses couldn't understand what was normal about it, but she didn't bother arguing. This was Akuri's first time witnessing such a thing in person. She immediately asked, "Can I pet the little puppy?" The thief chuckled, explaining that this creature was not a puppy, but a baby dragon. Just then, Yulia caught the scent of blood in the air. She rushed to investigate and discovered that a member of the team tasked with protecting Mimiko had collapsed, unconscious. At that moment, something stirred behind the bushes. Ulysses immediately drew her sword, ready to strike. A few seconds later, she heard the clash of weapons from afar. Before he could dash over, Ulysses yelled for him to take Akuri and leave immediately. Hearing this, he picked up Aurori, but before they could escape, the assailant arrived with razor-sharp claws. In a mocking tone, she demanded that they hand over the child. It seemed the villain had skipped too many literature classes, as her articulation was utterly lacking. Consequently, he thought the child she referred to was the baby dragon. He even asked, "Oh, is it a dragon hunter?" No, but Yulia didn't think so. She sensed the situation was more complicated and urged him once more to get out of there. The baby dragon was clearly more intelligent, possessing an IQ that rivaled our rice cookers, swiftly snatching him up and flying away. Ulysses took a moment to marvel at his talent, capable of taming a dragon, a species notorious for its hostility towards humans. She then turned to confront the attacker. Though she tried to parry the blows with her sword, she couldn't hold out for long. In the end, she was knocked to the ground, struggling to rise and asking, was the child referring to the dragon or Akuri? How does someone like this even pass literature class? The woman didn't bother to reply, confident that Yulia couldn't possibly withstand her. To prove her point, she knocked Yulia's sword away and skewered her like a donut. Yet, Ulysses refused to give up, pouring all her strength into the fight. She hurled the magical crystal towards her foe. At that moment, the woman of the house was strolling with her father-in-law when she heard a loud explosion. She wondered what it was, and the old man remarked that it was the demon lord causing chaos. Of course, she still refused to believe him. Yulia thought the final battle was over, but from beneath the soil, that woman resurfaced, more formidable than ever. Ah, she's just unlocked a new piece of equipment, another pair of horns. So that's the demoness. Huh. Perhaps the old man's warnings about the demon lord were indeed true. The woman confirmed this and revealed that she had been aware of Yulia's group defeating the demon lord. Yo, where are you going? At this moment, Yulia realized she had been tracking their group since the city was attacked. But now, without any weapons in hand, she had no other options left. She sat there, accepting her fate, hoping at the very least for her own safety. Fortunately, earlier, he had been brought back to town by the dragon. While silently contemplating that this might be the end, she still felt a sense of fulfillment knowing she had protected him, no matter what. But just then, a sound echoed beside her, pulling her back to reality. That voice, that person, none other than Coat. She couldn't believe he had returned. A flood of thoughts rushed through her mind. Had he come back with the dragon? Did he have the dragon's fighting skills to help her? Coat's battle skills were truly beyond saving. She couldn't imagine losing the one she had fought so hard to protect all this time. Worse yet, the dragon had just thrown Coat into a tree. Right, riding a dragon didn't make him better at fighting. He had always been just an ordinary human. Ordinary, except for all the extraordinary things. Perhaps she rushed over to him, asking why he came back, why he was so stubborn. He charged into danger knowing full well he was weak. Seeing him, he might as well admit he acted impulsively, but he genuinely wanted to run away with her. Before she could process his heartfelt words, she heard another noise. Oh my, didn't she check the calendar? Or were they chasing KPI before July? In front of them was a horde of pigs charging, dust swirling, distracting the demon girl. They quickly hopped onto one and fled. On the pig's back, she asked where Akari was, and the robber replied she had been taken to safety. She questioned him again about why he did such a thing, but he couldn't stand by while someone precious to him suffered while he leisurely escaped. As her heart fluttered. Look at that. He just called her precious while Lizlock was lost in daydreams. Coat had confessed right in front of her that she was very precious to him, and he truly saw her as a friend. Yet, within her, a mix of sadness and joy stirred. Why did her heart flutter for him? Could it be she had fallen for him? But she had no time to ponder further, as a surge of fire from the demon erupted, vanishing the herd of pigs. She and Coat were thrown to the ground. The demon turned back with flames blazing in its hands, and Ulysses decided to borrow Coat's sword to fight, even knowing she might not win. But she couldn't betray the hope he had placed in her. Sadandachaz, coming back here, she intended to slice through the flames with her ultimate technique. But the problem was, this technique was incredibly difficult, and she had never succeeded before. She attempted to slice through the fire, but of course, it was ineffective. However, she was not harmed. She looked up and spotted Akori as she was there, and then she realized the demon had withdrawn the fire. What did that mean? Was Akori the child the demon was searching for? Questions lingered in her mind, yet no answers came. Before she could speak, she suddenly fainted and the demon left. The robber immediately healed Ulysses, and she opened her eyes, replying that she was fine, though her mind was filled with doubts. The first question was, how had Akori jumped onto her head just now? She asked them what had happened, and she was shocked when the robber told her that Akori hadn't jumped at all. It turned out she had been far away from the scene. So, in reality, she had used teleportation. Yulia was astonished, knowing teleportation required a magic gate. But magic was still unrefined in their world. Even those who had tried could not master it. Worse still, Akori had teleported without needing a teleportation stone. Ulysses asked if the girl could demonstrate again, but Akori replied no. Before she could ask more, another pig appeared. The pig ran over to call them, and the group saw many sick pigs sprawled around. Coot and Ori immediately ran to heal them, while Yulia took the pigs back to their owner. The woman asked where Ulysses' husband was, instead of denying. Ulysses gently said a kind villager had helped Coot, and now he was going to thank that person. That villager was no other than the dragon. As he was preparing to take off, the dragon called him back to show him something and took off immediately. Meanwhile, Akori and Yulia continued driving back on the road. Yulia, the little Policia, kept pondering about Akori. She asked if she was the one who had dispelled the magic earlier, but Akori replied no, so it was the demon who had helped. Why would the demon do that? Could it be because of Akori? So many questions still lingered in Yulia's mind. She knew she had to investigate more about Akori, and luckily, she was still alive to do so. Suddenly, they saw the dragon returning, bringing medicine, but this time, he had an inexplicable guest accompanying him instead of himself. It was the demon. Then he began to explain that when the dragon took him away, he had met the injured demon. Not knowing what to do, he decided to brew an antidote to save her. When she asked what he was doing, he replied it was an antidote, and she scolded him. Are you stupid for wanting to save your enemy? He admitted he was indeed foolish, but he didn't see her as an enemy, because if she hadn't pulled back her attack, both Akori and Ulysses would have been harmed. So he would help her brew the antidote and give it to the demon to drink. After drinking, she immediately felt revitalized, but then she collapsed right after. The robber said he had added sleeping medicine to the antidote, so she would sleep soundly for about 3 more days. As much as he wanted to help, he felt powerless. He couldn't turn a blind eye to the pain she had inflicted on others. Even if she was a demon, she had no right to harm humans, and that was the just punishment she had to face. The female demon was taken aback, but he swiftly shoved her into the vehicle. Seeing the demon, Yulia felt a wave of concern and worry wash over her. Would everything be all right? After all, just returning home after a long day filled with drama felt like a small miracle. It felt like she had been gone forever, even though it had only been a brief moment. Fortunately, they made it home. Sana and the others rushed out, enveloping Akori in a warm embrace, their worries finally easing, while Liselotte joined in for a hug. Yulia knew she shouldn't have let Liselotte and Akori get too close, but today was a happy occasion, so she decided to bend the rules while lost in thought. Suddenly, a strange man emerged from the workshop, and worse yet, she was utterly surprised that no one had mentioned anything to her beforehand. Indeed, she felt like an unfortunate woman surrounded by a bunch of troublesome kids causing chaos all day long. He expressed his hope to continue contributing to the development of the entire workshop and to encourage the spirit of dedication within him. Meanwhile, Ulysses began to suspect Rakuto. as she hadn't received any reports from Mimiko or Ophelia regarding this individual. So she instructed him to go inside and prepare dinner or something. Then she told Senna to follow along and reminded her to keep an eye out. With just the two of them remaining, Rakuto suddenly appeared cheerful and gave orders. Now, Ulysses did not want to, but it was easy to notice something was off. In an instant, she realized he was not real, but merely an illusion created by Liselotte's sword. So, basically, it was just a mess that ended up on her feet. Talk about karma biting back. Though no one asked, Liselotte proudly explained how she had whimsically imagined what her crush would look like 25 years later, and so she conjured up this illusion, ignoring her silly joke. The illusion finally dissipated, leaving behind a note from Mimiko stating that she would be here in 3 days after completing her investigation report on Akuri. 3 days later, Mimiko arrived and presented her investigation report. She stated that after thorough investigation, her team concluded that Akuri's existence was unprecedented. Or perhaps it could be a completely new discovery. She explained that while Akuri possessed human traits, some parts of her body, such as her nails, contained similar properties to mana crystals, aiding in spatial movement. And of course, no ordinary human is born with such traits. She added that spatial movement was an ancient art long forgotten. Thus, Akuri could merely be a different species and not a threat, but Mimiko honestly did not want to take any risks. So, she suggested sealing Akuri to nullify her space magic abilities, like teleportation. I'll take her to the research room for a closer look. Kurt immediately objected. He compared himself to Akuri, saying if everyone could trust her, why couldn't they trust Mimiko? He emphasized that she was incredibly humble and kind. She even tried to help a demoness who once wanted to harm her. For that reason, Kurt was convinced Akuri deserved to be treated as a human, not a threat just because she possessed extraordinary powers. He declared firmly that he wouldn't let Mimiko take Akuri away, and Ulysses and Liselott would stand with him. They affirmed that the three of them were Akuri's little father and little mother. Mimi realized they were willing to take responsibility for Akuri. So she stopped the debate and stood up to request a meeting with the demoness imprisoned in the basement. Kurt pleaded with Mimi not to imprison the demoness, but she retorted, "Come on, climb up on my head. I'll share my meals with you too." Then she went down to the basement to inject the demoness to wake her up. However, the demoness refused to speak, as a warrior would not voice anything unnecessary. Hearing this, Mimi purposely provoked her, and the demoness immediately crumbled under the pressure. She attempted to attack, but the barrier in the cell nullified her magic. Now, the demoness realized she was completely powerless, and Mimiko began to interrogate whether her allies were nearby. However, the demoness refused to answer, declaring she would only talk to the one who defeated her. So, Mimi called Kurt in, referring to the demoness as sister, asking if she was doing all right. The demoness seized the opportunity to lament. These chains hurt too much, hoping he would be foolish enough to free her. But he politely declined, saying that Mimiko and the others had instructed him not to release her until the interrogation was over. The demoness directly addressed the matter, mentioning that Kurt had brought up the name Hildegard. She explained to the onlookers that Hildegard was the demoness Kurt had shared his first kiss with during his early teenage years, when she heard the name mentioned. He explained that she often accompanied her father to his village to trade, and according to Sisha, he remembered that this girl and the demoness had the same pair of horns. So he mentioned her name to the demoness, thinking they might be acquainted, when Kurt confirmed that it was indeed the Hildegard he was referring to. It was the Hildegard the demoness had been thinking of. The demoness revealed her true purpose. She was here to rescue. According to her, Hildegard was being held captive by Marquis Tychon. But why would she want to rescue Akuri or even a dragon? Regardless, Kurt earnestly pleaded with Ulysses to join him in rescuing Hildegard, as he had wished for this for a long time. However, Ulysses, being smart, wouldn't be fooled easily. She demanded the demoness explain why she attacked Akuri. The demoness replied that while investigating Marquis Tai, she discovered he was also probing the magic workshop. Therefore, she had come here. In the process, she stumbled upon an unconscious Akuri, and realized she had just used the 7th arcane spell, teleportation. Thus, the demoness wanted to seize that ability to teleport directly to where Hildegard was imprisoned and rescue her. Kurt believed her without checking for evidence, but Yulia wanted proof. So, the demoness revealed a necklace hidden among her jewelry, adorned with the emblem of a mage, which was the same symbol Hildegard once wore. She disclosed that Hildegard had gifted her that necklace. Additionally, the reason the demoness had stopped attacking Akori was that she had seen Yulia holding a dagger with a similar emblem of her crush, which Kurt confirmed was a gift from Hildegard. Now, everything was clear, and everyone, including Mimiko, agreed to embark on the quest to rescue Hildegard together. However, Mimiko still couldn't free the demoness. The demoness naturally reminded them to promise they would rescue Hildegard, and having placed her complete trust in Kurt, she revealed her real name. Her true name was Soap. Akuri unexpectedly appeared, and Kurt immediately scolded her for interrupting their important conversation. The girl pouted, apologizing because she just wanted to play with everyone. They reassured her after calming her down. Kurt then turned to Mimi, asking for her help because he couldn't undertake such a grand rescue mission alone. Now, they just had to devise a perfect plan that no one could easily detect. Everyone was astonished when she pulled out a detailed map of the Maki Tycoon's mansion, questioning how she had such extensive information. Then she presented recorded documents detailing the mansion's history. Hashem? According to the contents, the first Marquis lived there with his wife, who passed away 15 years ago, after giving birth to a daughter. Strangely, a few years later, the daughter also died from some mysterious illness. But for now, they wouldn't delve into how suspicious the Marquis was. They still needed a plan. The mansion didn't have many rooms, but there was a special room that Tycoon never allowed anyone near. While everyone speculated which room was most likely used for holding illegitimate captives, it had to be that one. Moreover, reports indicated that Tycoon frequently brought food to that room, meaning someone was being held inside, and he was keeping them alive. But for what purpose? No one knew. The room was always locked, with the key always in Tycoon's possession, and another individual had the authority to roam around. Thus, they needed to be exceptionally clever to infiltrate successfully. But, of course, this path is blessed by a guardian angel, perfectly suited for our plan. With the author's protection, Liselotte was the first to devise the perfect scheme. If the key is always with Tychon, then let's make him open the door himself. When everyone asked how, she suggested creating an illusion of a thief breaking into that very room. In that panic, Tychon would fear an AI was trying to free the prisoners he held captive. Thus, he would open the door to check, and they could slip inside. A flawless plan. Right now, we just wait to see how they execute it. Luckily, the festival is just around the corner. They have all the reason to enter the city because the master craftsman will be working there. They've created an illusion of the master slowly. Yes, that's Rikuto. Then she suggested using that very illusion to approach Titan. The plan sounded fantastic, but they needed to bring Coat along since they couldn't leave him alone with the demon girl. However, since Coat's true identity is still a secret, they needed a valid excuse to take him along. And since it's the festival season, Liselotte proposed they could invite him with the two girls to explore the city and enjoy the local delicacies. It was a plan that was both discreet and effective, but it left the two girls, who also wanted to steal his attention, wondering if this was a festival trip or a date. The two girls decided to play rock, paper, scissors for the right to hang out with him, with Liselotte winning, while Ulyssia could only sigh in defeat for missing her chance. Finally, the group set off on their adventure and arrived at the inn. And of course, Akuri was right there with them. Rikuto made an excuse to go rest, and Ulyssia told Kote to stay with Liselotte and Akuri. As for her, she would go investigate Tychon. But, as usual, Kote felt utterly useless since no one ever entrusted him with any tasks. He insisted that he wanted to accompany Ulyssia on her investigation, but Liselotte immediately protested, as this was her first chance to spend time alone with him, and she wasn't going to let him ruin that. She began to convince him that today would be a lot of fun. They could stroll around and watch performances together. Oh, It sounded so much like a real date. He could see a future home and children in her eyes, and he decided to stay with her on the first day of their journey. She took him to the city to join in the festival, and to avoid getting lost, he carried Akuri in his arms and told her to hold on tight. The scene was warm. Like a happy family, they paused to buy fruits, and with a noble heart. The father who sacrifices for his family bought just one fruit. The girl said she wouldn't buy for herself and shared her part with them. However, when he took a sip of the fruit drink Lisa had, her face lit up as she realized her crush was drinking from the very spot she just sipped. Isn't it just like a kiss when he returns it? She instantly downs the rest of her juice. He's left bewildered, wondering why she's in such a hurry. Even after finishing, she keeps the fruit in her bag. He thinks about tossing it away. But what do those clueless guys know about a girl's sensitive heart? She lies and says she loves it because it's a local fruit from this area. They continue strolling through the festival, and she's curious if he's ever participated in many festivals before. After all, he's been adventuring a lot, and he reveals he's seen many festivals but never truly experienced them, as he's just a foot soldier in his party. He just wants to help. Lislott can't help but feel a pang of sympathy. He mentions that today he wants to enjoy fully, and wishes for Akuri to have fun too. Lislott promises herself to make sure he has an amazing day. Especially since she plans to confess her feelings after their outing. They wander through the market, taking part in games, and he wins the weightlifting contest. While she crushes the heart-shaped target, her goal is simple: to have a delightful day. The more she cherishes the moments, the closer she stays by his side. She plans to conclude with a heartfelt confession. However, the market isn't the right place for a confession, so she leads him to a quiet park. To her, today has already been perfect. He enjoys the time spent with her, and his heart is ready to embrace her confession. She sees him gazing toward a building. She intends to approach and confess, but as she gets closer, she realizes he's staring at the tycoon's mansion. In an instant, she understands he's worried about Hildegard. Rather than being selfish, she gently asks if he's feeling anxious. He insists he's not worried because everyone promised to rescue Hildegard, and if he were worried, it would mean he doesn't trust them. Yet, he feels utterly helpless because everyone is busy with their own tasks, while he feels he can't help at all. She reminds him he's the one who extracted the poison from her body and built a magic workshop in just one day. If that's not an achievement, then what is? He doesn't see those things as anything significant. He insists that anyone else would have done the same, and healing others isn't a great feat. His mindset really frustrates her. She wonders how to comfort him now. Then she says she really likes him, but it's not a confession. It's to express that everyone cares for him. She tells him that everyone in the workshop is there because of him, because they care for him. That's why they willingly want to save him, not out of duty or obligation. He starts to understand what Lislott is trying to say. He admits he cares for everyone too, and though at times he feels like a failure, he still feels happy knowing he can be useful in their eyes. Her words truly touched his heart. Their interrupted conversation was finally broken by Akuri. The little girl came bouncing over, complaining about being hungry. He scooped her up in a hug, and she looked at him affectionately. At that moment, it was supposed to be the perfect time for her to confess, yet she still couldn't bring herself to say the words. However, just seeing him smile at her was enough. The next day, it was Ulysses' turn to go on a date with Cut. Before leaving, she stared at the sword he had just forged for her. After she accidentally lost her old sword in a previous battle, he had mined some midrin and adamantine, then borrowed a sword from a local blacksmith. Finally, he crafted it into a sword for her. The blacksmith laughed heartily when he heard Cut say he would forge a sword from such rare alloy, but he was very serious. The sword he forged was so sharp and powerful that it could easily slice through a solid rock, and the blacksmith, upon seeing the final product, was shocked as though he had witnessed a divine creation, so humbled that he could go up the mountain and immediately left to train and improve his craft. Ulysses suddenly snapped back to reality, excited at the thought of her date with her crush. Fortunately for her, Akuri was still fast asleep after a day of running around the market, allowing Ulysses some private time with her crush. While she was enjoying the festival, he erupted in fury because the two had been on good terms before. The tycoon's assistant reported an investigation revealing that all the chefs in the castle had been bribed by that fat guy, and naturally, they were all immediately fired. The henchman panicked upon hearing this because Liselott was visiting the castle the next day, and now there was no one to cook for her. However, the assistant had planned to serve the winning dessert from the cooking contest along with tea. The henchman thought it was a good idea and told the assistant to bring the pastry chef to meet him the next morning. At the table, they spread out the map of the tycoon's castle. Ra and Ulysses told Cut they would go rescue Hildegard today. She explained that Hildegard's cell could only be accessed through the kitchen, as that was the easiest way to move food without being detected. Rakuto said he would try to find evidence that Hildegard was being held in the castle and persuade the tycoon to release her. Ra assured Cut not to worry and said she would help her. She would return to help Luna at the shop until her father recovered after Cut left. Using illusions, 2 problems arise. First, she must draw the dagger to unleash the illusion, but she can't approach Tycoon, since he always keeps his distance like a shadow in the night. Secondly, the illusions cannot touch physical objects, which poses a barrier to their meeting. To resolve both dilemmas, Liselott decides to create an illusion of herself next to Rakuto, then cloaks herself in invisibility to grasp items as needed. With determination, they set off to meet Tycoon, and Liselott conjures 2 illusions before preparing to vanish. However, just then, they receive news from their spies reporting back. Cut has been hired as a temporary chef for Tycoon's castle, and he finds himself in the kitchen alongside Akuri, Alicia, and Liselott, utterly bewildered, unsure whether to laugh or cry at the absurdity of the situation. Just moments before, Cut was busy making buns at his stall when he heard Luna's frantic scream from outside. He rushed out only to discover that she was panicking because a knight had appeared, demanding that she prepare 100 buns for Lord Tycoon immediately. Not only that, the knight insisted she come serve as a temporary chef in the castle that very day, but Luna couldn't leave her stall unattended. Cut assured her there was no need to worry. He would make the buns in her stead. Afterward, he would head to the castle himself. He handed the already baked buns to the knights for a taste test. As they waited, the moment they took their first bite, they froze as if they had reached enlightenment. When Cut returned with the remaining batch, he found all the knights standing like statues, though. He thought they were merely exhausted from working through the festival. But as soon as he heard the captain's voice, the knights snapped back to reality, claiming that the fatigue from the festival had vanished without a trace after tasting Cut's buns. Afterward, Cut set off to the castle with Akuri. On the way, he suddenly realized that the one who summoned him was none other than Tycoon himself. Upon arriving at the kitchen, the assistant took the buns from Cut and mentioned they would be served to the princess. Though he had lived with Listo for some time, Cut still worried that the buns he hastily made might not meet the quality required for the princess. However, the assistant reassured him that there was no need for concern. All he needed to do was stay still and be ready to cook something else if requested. After the meeting between Tycoon and Listotta concluded, as the assistant left, Cut's gaze drifted toward the door at the end of the kitchen, and he began to ponder about Hildegard. Meanwhile, Listotta met with Tycoon while maintaining her illusion. Tycoon tried to brush off the incident with the fat chef who had attempted to attack her. While Listotta kept Tycoon occupied, Yulia was stuck outside guarding the door, hoping to steal blood with little more than brain power, feeling uneasy because he truly wanted to open that door to search, but also understanding that he shouldn't act recklessly, possibly ruining the group's plans. Yet, it was not easy for him to restrain that desire. The next day, Akari noticed Cut was anxious and asked him what was wrong. Cut replied that perhaps his friend was being held behind that door, but he couldn't open it at that moment. Upon hearing this, Akari's eyes sparkled with excitement as she declared that she could take him through the door to find their friend. In an instant, she wrapped her arms around Coat, and together they were whisked away to the area behind the door. Coat was taken aback by Akari's ability to teleport them both, but a nagging feeling told him they shouldn't be there. He urged Akari to return, but sadly, she couldn't comply. Her disappointment was palpable, as she had longed to accompany him in the search for their friend. While he was still pondering how to comfort Akari, he heard a woman's voice from the adjacent room. Convinced it was Hyde, he disregarded the warning signals in his mind and decided to rush to her rescue. He took a pin and used it to unlock the door, only to find an old woman inside. Meanwhile, Taikon was talking to Rakuto, expressing his desire to appoint him as the governor of the city. However, Rakuto replied that he wanted to ask him a few personal questions before accepting. Lislot left the room, allowing the two men some privacy. As soon as she left, Taikon relaxed, oblivious to the fact that the princess was silently observing everything. Now, the princess was convinced that Taikon wanted to conduct secret dealings with the magic workshop, which he didn't want her to know about. She decided she would force him to confess. She manipulated Rakuto and inquired what Taikon wanted from him. Taikon seemed to appreciate Rakuto's straightforwardness. Rakuto asked him if he desired immortality. Cutting back, Coat and the old woman both stared at each other in astonishment. She invited him inside, explaining that she rarely had visitors. Coat was still in shock, struggling to find his voice, but the old woman also invited Akari in. Noticing that the old woman looked unwell, Akari inquired about her health, to which the old woman replied that she hadn't been eating well lately. Akari then gives her a bun that Coat made. The old woman accepted it without hesitation, immediately surprised as she tasted the delicious flavour, a stark contrast to the meal she'd had recently. Suddenly, Coat realised that the woman didn't seem truly old. It was merely her appearance. He asked her how that was possible. The old woman was astonished that he could discern this with just his eyes. So, where was he? She began to marvel at his other abilities. She asked if he was a famous wizard. Coat replied that he was just a mere errand boy at a small eatery. However, she insisted that Coat was special and suggested that perhaps he was the only one who could save Hyde again, who was imprisoned just below this room. Coat was shocked and immediately wanted to use the hard bread to dig down like it was a shovel. The old woman stopped him and led him to a secret passage that would take them to Hidegan. No, Taikon explained that human life is fleeting, whereas races like elves and demons can live for a long time. In the past, there were experiments combining elf and demon cells with human bodies to extend lifespan. Rakuto immediately countered that those experiments had failed and were strictly prohibited due to their dangerous consequences. But Taikon insisted he had great faith in Rakuto's talent and believed he might be the one to create an elixir of immortality. Now, Lislot had grasped Taikon's entire plan. She wanted to create an illusion to reveal the truth, but first, she needed more information. Rakuto asked Taikon why he was in such a hurry. He reminded him that possessing demon cells and conducting experiments was illegal by both national and ecclesiastical law. So, if Taikon dared to reveal his plan to a stranger, it showed he was cornered and running out of time. He pointed out that Taikon didn't seem like someone who needed anything more in life, suggesting he wanted someone else to live longer instead of himself. Taikon refused to answer. He only stated he needed that elixir. Lislot realised that asking more would be futile. So, she initiated the second part of her plan. She used her SAO avatar outside to shout loudly. The next day, Ulyssia opened the door and let her SAO avatar in. She informed Taikon that thieves had broken into the mansion, and she tried to fight back, but they managed to slip into the kitchen. Taikon panicked upon hearing this and ordered Rakuto and Lislot to stay in the room. He instructed Ulyssia to protect them at all costs, and not to leave the room. Then he rushed away. Lislot followed stealthily. Before long, she arrived at a secret area and found Taikon even more frantic upon discovering the door to the room was ajar. He hurried inside, calling out for Famil. Liz was taken aback, as that was Taikon's daughter's name. However, he looked shocked to find her no longer in the room and immediately headed for the secret passage within. She found a silver hair on the bed and used her abilities to amplify her senses to find more clues. No. At that moment, she caught a whiff of Coat, and despite her urge to rush to him, she decided to meet Ulyssia first. At the same time, Famil led Coat and Akari to the room where Hydegat was imprisoned. Coat apologised to his friends for ruining the plan. He then opened the heavy door and saw Hydegat chained inside. She immediately recognized him as the boy she had met in the village, and Coat was overjoyed that she still remembered him. He said, "I'm here to rescue you," but Famil had already taken care of that. She swiftly disabled Heidegat's chains. Coat rushed to her side, but as he got closer, he realized she hadn't changed at all. Despite the 15 years since their last meeting, he searched for any sign that she had matured but found none. Finally, he could only say, "Hildegard still looks just like she did before," which instantly earned him a scolding from Hildegard about the medicine he had given her long ago that prevented her from growing up. She kept punching Cout, furious that he had abandoned the village without a single word and vowed that he would pay for everything. Cout could only stammer apologies, but then Akari stepped forward to defend him, saying, "Hildegard, don't be so harsh on your own father." This only made her blood boil more, because in her eyes, Cout had forever changed her. And yet, he went and had a child with someone else. Cout quickly explained, Akari hatched from an egg. There were no wild moments in bed, and Hildegard found it hard not to believe him. Then she said she was hungry and asked if he had anything to eat. He only had some hard bread. Hildegard confirmed that Famil had asked if the medicine could be remade, but Cout said he had never seen the rainbow flower again and couldn't make the medicine without it. He apologized to Famil for not being able to help much, but she said it was okay. Cout was stunned when he heard the name Famil and asked if she was really the tycoon's daughter. She confirmed it. Cout's simple brain officially overloaded. He had to try harder to understand what was going on. Just as he was about to grasp something, a thug entered, sighing in relief to see his daughter safe. He thought Cout was a thief, but Cout fired back, saying kidnapping is wrong no matter the reason. First, Tychon retorted that Cout would never understand his situation, but Cout said he understood all too well because he was a father who deeply loved his daughter. Then Cout went off the rails, accusing Tychon of no longer loving his daughter after she grew up, which was why he kidnapped Hildegard to love her forever as his child. Everyone was stunned and confused, but Cout wasn't finished yet. He claimed that because Tychon only paid attention to Hildegard, Famil drank the medicine to become an old woman. Even AI was speechless after hearing this conclusion. Finally, Cout accused Tychon of obsession, and though he could endure much, he couldn't accept this charge. Still, Cout rambled on, trying to guilt Tychon into feeling he didn't love his daughter after she matured. At last, Tychon couldn't take it anymore and used magic to paralyze him.